and welcome to the 7th session of the doctoral seminar series. My name is Dominique Somda. I'm a researcher at UMA, and I'm hosting this seminar. The recording for the seminar will be available on our YouTube channel. For the last 2 quarters, we have invited speakers to reflect on the challenges and strategies of the doctoral work, with a particular focus on the turning points and critical experiences that shape their doctoral journey. Today, we are welcoming Yousra Hamdaoui. Dr. Hamdaoui holds a PhD in political science from the University of Ceuta, Morocco. She's interested in questions of security, governance, violence, extremism, resilience, and soft power in the Sahel region and north of that region. She carried out research in Mali, Niger, Mauritania, Senegal, and Morocco. She's in charge currently of communication and research at Movida, IPAR. IPAR is Initiative Prospective Agricole et Rurale in Senegal. She's an associate researcher at the Laboratoire d'analyse des sociétés et des pouvoirs, l'ASPAD, at the Gaston Berger University of Saint Louis in Senegal. And she's also an associate researcher at the Center for Global Studies of the International University of Rabat in Morocco. Yousra is a postdoctoral fellow at UMA. She's my colleague at UMA, and she examines the state of scholarly publishing and dissemination in North and Arabophone Africa from a critical perspective. Today, she's presenting a paper entitled, as you see, how to do fieldwork in a war zone. And we are extremely excited and glad and honored to have Yousra among us. So Yousra will speak for 15-20 minutes. She'll tell us. And after a presentation, the floor will be open for questions. So Yousra, we are very glad to have you with us. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Dominique, for the presentation, and thank you for having me here to talk about how to do field work in a war zone. So let me first introduce or talk or say why I choose to speak or to talk about doing field work in a war zone. So since the outbreak of what is called the Arab Spring, followed by 2 civil wars in Libya and Syria during our contemporary era, but also in West Africa, and particularly in the Sahel region, we are witnessing a renewed interest in research in war zones. These zones are spaces with weak governance and weak states, contested borders, and where non-state actors can assume sometimes or with affairs. So doing field work in these zones is not an easy task. This is the reason why we have to proceed to the design of the necessary tools in order to realize field work in these particular areas. So in this presentation, I will answer the following questions. What are the steps to follow to conduct this field work, and what are the challenges that we might face, especially as a female researcher, and what research ethic we should apply in context of field work? So the 2 first steps that we have to mention here, the first step is the preliminary observation that we have to observe before going to this field work. And in this step, there is one important point, which is the prevention and anticipation of risk. The prevention and anticipation of risk actually is something that we have to prepare before going to the field work. We have first to collect information on the environment where we are going to do this field work. So the collection of information might be done through social networks, Facebook or Twitter. We can contact or be in contact with people that are in these areas, so they can help us actually to have the necessary information before going to the war zone area. This this contact actually with the may or might help us to explore, to do exploration with actors that are located in this zone. It's very important to be in contact with people that are in these zones so that we have the necessary information about the security environment, the political environment before going there. And there is one important point, which is the identification of a resource person to facilitate access to the zone, the facilitator. This point is very important. The person, we really should take our time to identify the facilitator. We might contact this person 2 months before our field work, or we can also have 1 or 2 facilitator, be in contact with 2 facilitator at the same time. So once, and to have the in mind that if we can't have contact once in this field work with one facilitator, we can have contact with the other one. So this person or this resource person should be aware of the security environment, the political issues in the region, and might be also a translator, because as concerning my fieldwork, for example, in Mali, this facilitator helped me actually to do some interviews, because I wasn't able to speak with the people that I needed for my research in the local languages, for example, Bambara or Tamashek. And there is another important point in this step, in this prevention and anticipation step, which is maintaining physical safety and mental health. So how to maintain this physical safety? What can we do before going to the field work, to this field work? We can get familiar with emergency care in case of injury during this field. We can also take some medicines with us. So who knows, we all can get injured during this field. So it is important to have this kind of prevention tools before going, especially related to safety, to physical safety. And also there is another point, which is making sure to inform a person of confidence of all our movements, a person with whom we have to be in contact prior to or before going to the field work, or a person that we know in this area. So we have to tell her or to tell him all the steps or what we are doing, or all our movements during this field work.
Apology, Yusra. Sorry, may I interrupt 1 second? Like, I think some people would like you to speak a little slower. Just
okay.
Sorry to interrupt. Okay. Thank you so much.
Okay, so concerning this second point of maintaining physical safety and mental health. So I mentioned that we have to, before going to the field work, we have to get familiar with the emergency care in case of injury during this field. So taking courses of emergency care before going to this field work, and taking medicines that we might need in this field work in case of injury. Another second point to maintain our physical safety or security is to make sure to inform a person of confidence of all our movements, all what we do. We have to have a contact that we can text or call every time we have an interview with someone in this zone in this zone war. There is another important point that we can do before going to this field work, is to establish contacts with official institutions like embassies, local NGOs, humanitarian NGOs, and ministries. This is important. These people actually, they will of course give you information on the security situation of the region, the regions that you, or the locations that you don't have, where you don't have to go. But also these people are important, especially in your embassy. If you are foreigner, they can extract you from a trouble, and you are in a trouble. So during this field work. So now I'll move to the second step, which is the empirical observation during this fieldwork. So I insist on being accompanied by a trusted facilitator. It is important, as I mentioned, actually, it really helps a lot because they have all the information, even they can facilitate to you, they facilitate the access to the actors you need to, with whom you need to do your interviews while you're doing your research. There is an important point that I need to mention here while talking about the facilitator. It's the financial question, actually, because in this kind of field work, it is, or the financial question is important. Well, it's very expensive and costly to do field work in these zones. From my own experience, when I started in 2016, actually, and since you need these people with you, and you need to be in a regulatory or regular circulation to these zones, I didn't have a scholarship. I financed part of my field work, and another part was financed by projects where I were involved. So I did my field work by being financed from these projects. So this is a very important point to consider also if you want to go and do field work in these zones. It is expensive and costly, and you need to prepare a budget for this field work. Another point, actually, we can do, if we are going to a war zone, we don't need to go to this war zone during the occurring of the violence. Actually, we are not journalists, we are researchers. So this is why it is important to, like, you can do your field work from a zone that observe the war zone. Or for example, if I go to Mali, but I can go to the north of Mali because the situation is complicated. And because starting from 2012, I couldn't be, you can't go to the north if you have, you don't have, or you are not accompanied by a security operator. For example, someone from Operation Barkhane or La MINUSMA. So we can do our fieldwork from a zone that observe this zone war. You can do it from Bamako, you can do it from another city, even from another country. As I did, for example, because I went to 2016, 2018, I went to Senegal, even though Senegal it wasn't an area that concerned my research, but Senegal was important since it was it has les éléments français du Senegal that were training some armed anti-terrorist forces that are implicated in Operation Barkhane. So I used my Senegal to do my interviews with these actors implicated in Operation Barkhane, for example. So this is another important point to observe while you are in this field work. What are the challenges that we face as a female researcher when we do this kind of field works, and how to overcome these challenges? So it is not an easy task, and we can be subject to sexual harassment, sexist discrimination. But what I did before going to Mali, Niger, I was in contact with female researchers that have done this field work before me. Before 2016, I didn't know anyone actually in the region. So this is how I started. I was contacting female researchers. I established contact from 2016, April, I remember 2016. And I was writing to them, so they helped me to establish contacts from other people on whom I can rely during my field work. They also give me contacts of people that of actors that I will need while doing my interviews. And of course, there's another point, being well surrounded. This is important. When you, before going, you need to be in contact with people that might be that might help you while you are there if you are in trouble. So this is very important. Having building relationships of trust with people before you go, and even while you are in the fieldwork, is very important, so that you can rely on them if you are if you have a problem. And there is another important point, is to leave the fieldwork if you feel that you are in danger. So we need to just collect qualitative data for our research, and we don't need to endanger ourselves, actually. So it's very important to take or to consider. What are the ethics of research to observe in this kind of context? This is important because the degree of surveillance and control by intelligent agents or services is very important in this context because of volatile security. So we might be contacted by intelligent agents. We might even meet them during our fieldwork. So these people might be helpful because they have information that we don't have. But there is a very important point here, is that there is a line or a border that we have to trace. You are doing field work, you need information, or you need data, qualitative data to valorize or to for your work. But this collaboration, if I might call it, doesn't have to pass to another point or to be a recruitment, because some agents might actually ask you to be recruited with them. So this is very important, and you have to pay attention before going to your fieldwork. As a research, we are researchers, and we have to observe this ethical integrity while doing our research. And there is another point, and I will conclude with this point. The most important thing is that we are collecting qualitative data to valorize our research. And we are not doing this field work to impress, actually. So you have to select the data that is necessary for your work. We don't say that we are going to war zones to impress or to endanger ourselves. So this is very important to observe, actually, while as an ethical point while doing this field work. Thank you, Dominique. And thank you for the audience also.
Thank you so much, Yusra, for this fascinating presentation on a theme that is so important, not because all of us are going to work on a war zones, but because like the question that are asked and the kind of like strategy that your work exemplify are actually important for all of us when we are confronted to a specific crisis. And I think that, you know, because it's such a case of extreme violence and extreme surveillance, like you, this example allow us to really like think through strategies and, you know, yeah, and ethical question and pragmatic question about research. I have so many questions, and I've already asked you questions privately, but I still have more. But I'm going to be nice with the public and wait. But I'm still going to start with maybe a couple of questions. Yeah, maybe Yusra, if you don't mind, we can stop the sharing of your, yeah, thank you. So, okay. So I lost my question, but when, sorry, it was on the screen somewhere. But one of the questions that I had, I guess, was first, do you think that there are the war zone that researchers should avoid. And in a way, you kind of answers, because when I was listening to you, I felt that you described some like concentric circles. You described that, you have to stay away from the core, because that's not place where combatant are active, where actual combat happen. That's not a place for the researcher. So you describe sometimes, being in Bamako, being in Dakar, and observing from there. So from the kind of from outside circles of the zone. So in a way you answered, but is there more than you can think of? So that would be my first question. When would you, what would you exclude from possibilities of research, beyond just the combat? Is there context of war that you would avoid to document and to observe? My second question is, so you describe field work, but I'm curious about what goes after the field work, and how do you write about war? So this is another question, and this is not what you propose, but I'm still curious, about the perspective you have on that. How do you bear witness to violence? How do you write about what about neutrality? How do you document those things? Okay, so those are my first question, and I'll hop on the floor. There's already many hands.
Okay, so concerning your first question, that you wanted to know what are the contests of war zones that I didn't observe. So
that you would not.
That I would not. They are the spaces where the violence is occurring. Actually, you can't endanger yourself, because I am not a journalist. You are. I am a researcher. So, for example, in the north of Mali, we have a high risk of kidnapping since 2012. So I wouldn't put myself in these situations actually and go to the north of Mali. I didn't have the possibility. You can't have the possibility if. There is a possibility to go there if you are accompanied by an operator, a security operator from the actors that produce security in the region. So someone from Opération Barkhane or someone from the MINUSMA. So you have to be accompanied by these actors. So this context actually, and when you are accompanied by these actors, actually, you can't even do your research or your interviews as you like, or in the critical way, because in my work, I worked on securitization of terror in the Sahel region. So I was criticizing actually the security mechanisms in the region, in the Sahel region, from 2002 until today. They didn't produce security. So yes, this I tried, but I wasn't able actually to attain this region where the violence, the kidnappings were occurring, which is in the north of Mali. And yes, what is the second question? What goes after the field work? The field work actually concerns the actors of security and other actors also implicated in security in another way. It concerns my thesis, my PhD thesis, the securitization of war in the region in the Sahel region. So the most important thing that I produced actually is my thesis. So it was my concern, or my objective, my goal was to really show or to explain that these mechanisms or this construction of security didn't produce security in the region. Actually, what we have is insecurity from 2002, from all the prevention, the training system, military systems that we have in the place, until the second phase of securitization, as I call it, that implicates more military interventions, starting with Serval, with the French Operation Serval becoming that we replaced it, that was replaced by Barkhane. So this is the main point of my fieldwork. It was to really defend or explain that we didn't produce security in the region. So this is the main thing I wrote on this, from this fieldwork. So it was, and I also, there are papers now, so that I am currently writing, because I defended my thesis last year. So, and probably more things are coming.
Okay, we are looking forward to reading these papers. Okay, so we have Chikezi that is going to comment and ask questions.
Hi, Julia. I like your presentation, not only because it's on an important topic, but also because it was well presented. It was easy to follow. So thank you. My question will be on something you mentioned, but I think you did mention it in passing, the topic of mental health. I think you were talking about what to do before you go on the field. And you were talking about making sure you have a contact that can take you there and also protect you and stuff, you know, the physical aspects of it. But beyond physical safety, I was thinking about mental safety. What do you suggest will be the strategies for taking care of one's mental health? Because I imagine that, of course, there will be different kinds of traumas that one could experience in the field in such zones. So what would be your recommendation if you can expand that mental health aspect? Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chikezi, for your question. Well, concerning the mental health, actually, we can sometimes face fear, fear while we are doing this field work. Not because they have been in violence. Even if you can meet people that you don't know, and you can be in a room with someone, you're doing interview with them, and you're not comfortable. So this is, I think, it's a very normal human feeling. And how I faced it actually by sharing. I talk to people, to friends, with whom I was in contact. So I usually was in contact with someone on the phone, friend or family. So it's very important to share, to talk, to doing a pure talk, you just talk, and this is very important actually to maintain your mental health. So this is how I did it actually, and I'm probably because I developed resilience also. So yeah, this is what I can share from my own experience. I was surrounded by good people. I was sharing with some people of my family, some friends, close friends or colleagues. So this to maintain your or to take care of your mental safety, mental health.
And sorry, I was thinking also, do you also recommend maybe seeing a psychologist for people who may face maybe more intense degree of trauma or security issues in such fields?
We can also, it's very, well, it's a very important, we can have a face-to-face discussion with the psychologist, or if we don't have the possibility, or we can't build the resilience, because resilience also is not something easy to build, it's another story. But yes, you can, if you need, you feel that you need to talk with a professional, you go and talk with someone, with a professional person that can help you to overcome the trauma and the fear. But it wasn't, in my case, I didn't do that actually.
Thank you for your question, Chikezi, and thank you for your answer. I feel there might be also institutional question, like what resources are available to PhD candidates. Do they have access to those kind of also professional. No, it's not a question. It's just a comment that, you know, we could you know, ask for maybe, you know, more, or, you know, like to discussion around mental health, especially like in the context of such difficult field work. But we are going to ask Aza to unmute and to ask a question. Aza, please, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Yusra, for your presentation. I really enjoyed it also. I agree with Chikeze. It was very nicely written and very clear and also easy to follow. I was interested in the part where you talk, and ethics, the part where you talk about how did you manage to negotiate such kind of a very, you know, like very intense, very highly securitized spaces with security agents, which a lot of us, like me, basically, it was a very hard time for me to work. I mean, I was not working in a war zone or anything, but I was also working in a very highly securitized environment. So I had to somehow every time report, and I also had to acquire a lot of permits. So for me, I mean, it's also like, I mean, you are actually researching security, you know, and this is also like, I think it's also a very different level of engagement. It's not like just monitoring or censoring your work, but it's also they are actually part of your research. So I'll be interested if you could like just shed a bit of light on how did you manage to negotiate that space with them, with the security officers, or with the whole institution, without being somehow, I mean, it's obviously in your case, you are somehow in their good books, you know, so I would really like to know, how did you manage to negotiate that kind of very censored space? Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. So, you know, when you start doing field work, you learn also during this field work. And in my experience, I remember I was once contacted by someone from an embassy in an intelligence services. So, but I didn't know that he's from an intelligence service. So the first contact was, I was explaining what I'm doing. So there is a naivety, you talk, you speak. And this person also can give you some information or explain to you how the situation is going in this area. But if you feel, in my case, for example, that this person is trying to contact you many times, so as I did, for example, I was contacted in academia, in my profile in academia, or on LinkedIn. You can be contacted by these people many times. So here you have actually to, we don't negotiate actually, you stop. In my case, I can have 1 or 2 meetings with the person, but if you can continue in sharing information, you can, these people might be interested in recruiting you if you do it many times. So in my case, what I did actually is I don't respond, or you have to stop even the contact with this person at a certain point. You have to be clear in your mind, and you know what you want from this person, and what you are doing in this situation and this field work. You are trying to collect data for your research, and you don't want to move to another step, or to another step of collaboration. So in my case, there is no negotiation. It was just, you don't answer, you don't continue the talk with these people, with these actors.
Thank you, Aza. Thank you, Yusra, for your answer. We have a question now from Mona Lisa. Please unmute. Thank you.
Hi, hi Yusra, hi everyone. Thank you for a great presentation. It was very informative. I just wanted to ask if, for example, what other research methods, instead of the qualitative methodology, would you suggest researcher who wants to research on war zones, what other methodology do you advise instead of having to actually go there in person? Yeah, that's my question.
Instead of going, sorry?
Instead of going to the location.
Yeah. So my main methodology of work was qualitative methodology. I use process tracing in my methodology. So I combined gray literature with interviews. But what I advise you to do actually is as I said before, you can't go. You can't, if there is a violence or a war in a country, you are not obliged to go to this country or where the violence is occurring. You can choose to do your research from places or from zones in the same country where the violence doesn't occur directly, but the actors implicated in this violence they can circulate in the whole region. For example, as I said, so in Mali, for example, the people who can, or the armed groups that were producing violence in the region are not only, even if it is in north of Mali, they are circulating in Bamako, in other regions of Mali. So you can't go to these regions and have your interviews with them if you are working on, for example, violence. In my case, I was working on security mechanisms. So the actors that produce security were my main actors. So I was like tracing them whenever they can be located and not directly in the zone of war.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mona Lisa. Thank you, Yusra. I see Miguel's hand, but before we have a couple of questions in the chat. So, Amina, I'm not sure if you're in a situation where you can unmute. If you don't, I'm going to just read your question.
I can read it.
Okay, good.
For this wonderful presentation. And I just got a bit curious around the issue of, not the issue, but the conversation on trust and who to trust. I know you mentioned finding individuals before going into the field, but research in such a sensitive topic also involves encountering people who may not necessarily be credible or honest. So how do you identify who to trust and who not to engage further with within this process?
Yusra, I guess I think Arnaud, do you want to also ask your question, because I feel that they are related, and I think Yusra could easily answer to them both. Arnaud?
Yeah.
Yeah, please. Could you ask your question?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask whether we can easily trust data coming from such a field where when we know that collecting interrogating both actors is not easy. Can we trust such data? Is it not a bias? And more, can we easily trust data provided by NGOs when you know that NGOs, even NGOs cannot easily circulate and produce concrete and trustable data?
So I'll start by answering the question asked by Amina. Thank you, Amina, for your question about trust. Well, this is a very important point, trust, how you build trust. I started in 2016 doing my fieldwork and my thesis, I was in 2015. I didn't know anyone actually. I didn't have any contact. So you start by, as I did it, writing to people I don't know actually. And then you have some feedbacks. And from these feedbacks, you can do selection. You can select. How you select? When you continue exchanging with these people, when the contact and the link is maintained, 3 months, 4 months, 5 months, then you know that this person and you can trust, or you can count on this person. This is what happened in my case, actually. So once I arrived in Dakar first, and then I started establishing contacts with people in Mali from Dakar. So, and I also have to say that where I was located in Dakar, so I had very important contacts that helped me to have access to my fieldwork in Mali. So this is an important point. So before you go, you have to be in contact, or you find good people. In my case, it was an institution. It was I wrote to someone that I didn't know, so from an institution here based in Dakar, and this person or this institution helped me to establish my contacts. And other people I didn't know, to whom I wrote, helped me to establish contact and trust with other people. So, you know, trust is something you can build with your feeling also. You feel, even if it's not scientific, but feeling is very important. When how you feel the person, how your contact is with this person. It hasn't to be a contact based on interest. You don't only need to gather, to have information, to collect data. You need to build a good human relationship. So this is important. Some people with whom I were in my fieldwork, I still in contact with them until now. So this is very important. The relationship of trust has to be built not only based on interest. Your interest as a researcher is not only to have your data, it's also to build good relationships for the future. So this is the question concerning the trust. Minga, you asked about how can we trust NGOs and the embassies. When I cited NGOs and embassies, it was only, there are some NGOs that can be in a critical thinking or critical position, but this wasn't my concern. I wasn't collecting data from NGOs. I was actually, you can try to find contacts in NGOs, embassies, for your own security, for your safety, for your physical security. So you need to establish this contact and have some people on whom you can count once you are in this field work. So this is why I mentioned embassies, NGOs. It's not to collect data, but also just to have contact. If in case I have a trouble, I can't count on someone there.
Thank you, Yusra, with those answers concerning like trust in many aspects and with different actors. So actually, Minga is still going to ask his question because you are answering to Arnaud. So Minga, could you? Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Arnaud.
Yeah, thank you so much, Yusra. I think the beauty of your presentation is that you actually reminding us about how to prepare or how to do a research. You know, there's what we call planning, controlling, directing, coordinating, and all that. Because I recall having a friend who did not really follow exactly what you mentioned here. And he ran into trouble where he lost his belonging because, and you spoke about the gatekeepers. So what I'm getting from you is that, you know, you really need to pave the way so that, you know, you don't get caught into this situation. And I'm quite happy the way you clarify your position here and say that, you know, you did not really do a research into the war zone. You were actually on the periphery, which is very important for us to understand, because when I look at the title, I was like, okay, you were in a war zone, you know, trying to do research, which is a very complex issue to do. But to cut the story short, I think Mona Lisa and some of the colleagues have asked these questions, but I'm just gonna tweak it a little bit. How did you, because when there's a war or even on the periphery of the war zone, people moved around, you know, and also the people that you call that, who were your network, asking them questions, I'm sure they do have expectations, and these expectations can be in terms of their age, how they find themselves in that war zone or how they are in that war zone. And I just want to know, how did you manage their expectation? And also, when there's a war, even on the periphery, I think someone mentioned this issue, the sociocultural expectation of people. So how did you navigate that? How did you address that? That's just my question.
The expectation from the context or from
the expectation from people, because you went into this war zone, which is quite a complex space to be. People do have these aspirations, when we're doing research. Aspiration, it can be they have a desire, they have wish, because they see you as a researcher being on the field. So how did you manage their expectation in terms of some of the questions that you encounter, or they ask you, or how did you manage that? How did you navigate that?
Their expectations, how did I manage their expectations? Sometimes when you ask questions, there is something also important that you observe as a researcher, Minga, is you have to collect the data you need without actually going further. So what I need to explain this, what I'm saying, we don't need to extract, because for example, I remember I did some interviews with some women that were displaced from the north of Mali to the zone, to a zone near to the airport of Bamako, Senu, and we were asking or talking about radicalization or these questions. So people or these women weren't aware of these words, this discursivity. They were only what they needed actually is a safe place where they can stay. So when you are with this kind of people, fragile actually, you can't. You have to observe a kind of ethics. So you don't have to be egoistic or to extract the information that might hurt them, that might cause trauma for these people. So for me, actually, this is how I did the things. So I was doing my interviews, watching every case or every actor with whom I need to do. So the interview you do, you don't do the same interview with the same, or as you do it with the same categories or every category. So each category of actors I had in my research, I had a way to do a research with them. So I don't know if I answered your question, Minga, but this is how I did my interviews and this is how I tried actually, really, this is very important to me, to observe the human part is very important, and not to push just to have information. It's very important to stop somewhere.
Thank you, Miga. Thank you, Yusra. We have a question from Divine. Divine, if you want to ask your question now.
Thank you very much, Dominique, and thank you very much, Yusra, for such an amazing discussion, and also really important and sensitive subject, and also for really giving us a very clear and systematic, way about how to approach it. So I have a few questions just to go back to what you presented, and to also help some of us also here who are also trying to understand how it is, you know, to frame a subject, how it is to go about collecting data on a particular theme, how it is to pose a question around that theme, and also a question which I think Dominique had raised, which was also about how to write about a particular theme, especially when it's very sensitive. So my first question is, how do you select or choose war as a research theme? How do you come about deciding that I want to work on war, and how was it for you? Because this is so sensitive. This is something that is quite about risk. So how do you come about that subject? So that's my first question. And the second is, when you've selected this, and there's just so many issues, you know, to think about. So how do you frame a question? How do you decide that this is what I'm going to work on? This is the question I want to pose. This is what I'm going to try to collect data around. And then there is a third question, if you might allow me, which is connected to that. It's also, so how do you decide on a method? Because this is a subject which is taking you to something that is risky, that is very traumatic, that is also multi-sited, as you have demonstrated. You can go to the field site, you can do it from another field site. So how do you decide on a method? I'm saying this also because there's an interdisciplinary space, and some of us who like to pretend to be ethnographers and anthropologists believe that we have to be on the site in order to understand it, that if we don't embody the phenomenological experience, then we have not collected data. So I think it's important, you know, to just reflect on how you decide on a method. And then there's a fourth question, if you would allow me. It's about what becomes data in this context. It's related to what Arnaud was asking. So what do you consider as data in this context? And Dominique, if you could allow me for a last question. It's the gender question which you asked, and which is an important question, which I think you might need to speak to it a bit, because it's also like, what are the specific ontological and phenomenological issues that affect you as a woman or as a female researcher, you know, within this space, and how does this shape or affect your intellectual project or the epistemological quest for a thesis, which is ultimately what you're looking for, because you pose it at the beginning as a very important issue. So how does this really shape, you know, the outcome? Thank you.
And just if you allow me, because Divine asked like 6 questions in a row, and I may have to piggyback if I want to have a chance to ask another question. So I just wanted to piggyback on the last question on gender, because I would want also you to address, you address also the position and the figure of the researcher and the kind of heroism. And I was interested in the gender critiques that I heard, like, you know, in your presentation concerning like the like mise en scène, or, you know, staging of the presence of the researcher on the field that might be particularly important in that case. That's it, please. Yeah, we have 7 more minutes and you can answer all of Divine's questions.
Thank you, Divine, for all these questions. So I'll start by answering the first one. How do I select, how do I decide to work on a war? Well, it started actually while I was doing my master's in international relations in Rabat. I was interested in the transformations, security transformations in the region. So this discursivity we were exposed to an important discursivity on the war on terrorism. So I wanted to understand and comprehend this discursivity of the war on terror. So I did my master's in Morocco. So what was happening in the region interested me, and I started actually doing summer schools, workshops on this specific region, the Sahel, Mali, and all what happens. So this is how I chose when I was accepted in when I applied to do my PhD. This is how I decided to work on security or this war zone, because I wanted to understand how we construct. My concern was how we construct this discourse, the discursivity on security. So this is what motivate actually my the choice of this area. The second one is how I frame it, my question. Yes, how I frame it. I was doing readings, a lot of readings on securitization studies. And also because of deconstruction, because of how we construct the threats, the construction of threats. So what I wanted to do is actually to take the Sahel region and do it as a case of research through the securitization prism. So how we securitize this region, I was seeing it. So, and this is, I can also answer your question on method, because I was seeing actually from 2002, from when we started talking about the war on terror and how this war on terror was concerned what we call fragile states or weak states. We started deconstruction of this discourse on security started by putting some mechanisms, some prevention and training mechanisms in the region. So to train the armies in the region in order to counter or to fight terrorism. It was done first by some US mechanism, Pan-Sahel initiatives and other. So when I was like observing, tracing like the steps of how we arrived to this securitization of terrorism, how from 2002 until 2012 or until today actually, how following my method was process tracing, how observing on the ground the mechanisms, the gray literature from the strategies on the Sahel, how we look, because there are many strategies now on how we can counter terrorism on the Sahel. This discursivity with the practice, the mechanisms that came to support discursivity on the construction, discursivity on the terrorism in the region. So this is what motivates me actually to follow my methodology of process tracing, and also because I needed a methodology that I could do or follow with my theoretical framework, which was securitization studies, or the critical security studies. What comes from this data? What comes from this data actually, it's very important, because when you go and I started before even, before starting my thesis, I started working on radicalization in the Sahel region. But when you go, the field, the terrain, it gives you, it deconstruct actually all what you had before on a topic. This is why, it's like it is necessary. What becomes from the data is a critical thinking actually. This is why I collect. This is the main outcome from my data, is that from this fieldwork, I developed an important critical thinking actually. And it was thanks to this fieldwork actually that I deconstructed many things about security and insecurity in the region. And the last question, Divine, was about gender. Yes, how can you ask me a question? Can you re-say your question, Divine, please?
Yes. So the gender question is because you raised it at the beginning as really important, because one of the things you want to do is to discuss how it is to do field work as a woman in a war zone. So I'm just trying to understand what a specific, let me just say, experiential issues as a woman affects you, or what specific, I had framed it as ontological and phenomenological issues that affect you as a woman, and how do these in turn shape or redefine your intellectual project or your because at the end you're going through an epistemological quest for a thesis. Your project is to look for a thesis. So I'm just trying to understand, how does this affect? Does it affect it? If it does, how does it affect it?
It affected me because
I think Dominic also followed up with Dominic added a question onto it.
Yeah, but I'm fine. I think it was more a comment, and it was just like saying that what also I was like seeing in the presentation and hearing the presentation is also like a criticism in a way of the posture, like in the fear of the authoritative Eric male researcher on the field, or it could be also the male war reporter that is so present in our imaginary, that I felt was also connected to Divine's question on what it means to be like a woman in a war zone and writing about it and finding a voice and constructing like also discourse in that way.
My first motivation, actually, when I started doing the research in my region, I didn't meet many research women working on security. It's like it's a male field, and my motivation was also, among other motivations, is to deconstruct this and to say or to demonstrate that women can also work in the security field, and researchers, we can have researchers from the region that work on the security field and that can do this kind of field work, actually. So this is very important. Also, not only working on a war zone, but developing critical thinking on security issues in this region. So these are my main motivations as a female researcher working on security issues in the region. I don't know if I answered your question, Divine.
Merci.
Thank you. Okay, we are like slightly beyond time, but I'm going to allow Nabil to ask his question, and if you can please like answer, like even if it's brief, and that will be our last question before wrapping up the session. Nabil, do you want to read it, or do you want me to do it for you?
Okay, I'll read it. Thank you so much, Yusra, for such a fantastic talk indeed. I would like you to elaborate on how did you tackle the principle of proportionality while you are collecting data, while you were balancing between the collection of data, or the data that you intended to collect in the first place, and also the risks that might affect, for example, the research respondents?
So thank you, Nabil, for your question. But as I said before, with each category of actors with whom I did my interviews, actually, I mentioned, I don't know if you paid attention, my interviews with women displaced from the region, from the north of Mali, and you can, from my talk with them or my discussions with them, so you can feel vulnerability, you can feel also ignorance, but ignorance from the point that when you ask about radicalization, when you ask about terrorism, when you ask about threats, these people don't have access or intellectual access to these concepts. So there is like a certain point where you have to do or conduct these interviews. You don't have to go really further. You can just you can just, you know, like in my case, actually, they helped me to have or understand what was happening in the region in the north, because it wasn't able to go there. So so with each actor, with each category of actors, I had to know where to stop and where and if I can go further for asking, actually.
Thank you.
Thank you so
much.
much.
Thank you, Nabil. Thank you, Yusra. There's like praise in the chat for you. You can read it later. Like Mimi is very happy with the question and you raised and your presentation. It's time for me to thank you as well for this very, very rich session and conversation that you led. I can say that for me, like the centrality of trust in this conversation with the question of Amina and Arnaud and your answers, from me, like that's one that I will keep like with me, thinking of war as a field zone, as a place where, you know, trust is really like challenged, the trust of others, the trust for others, the trust of others for ourselves, and the trust of the data that are reliable or not. I think it's, you know, I will be interested to continue this conversation with you in other, you know, other spaces. So thank you so much for this, Yusra. In 2 weeks, on the 16th of June, we will receive Dr. Sarah Panata. She's a postdoctoral fellow at the IFRA at the University of Ibadan in Nigeria, and she will discuss archives. She's an historian. So we are looking forward to this session as well, and we hope that you will join us again. So thank you, Yusra, thank you, Yuma, thank you to everybody that joined us and asked questions. And yes, see you in 2 weeks.